Welcome to the Management Minute, presented by ManagingScrupulosity.com. Helpful pastoral guidance intended to encourage the effective management of your OCD and scrupulosity. The necessity of risk in the spiritual journey. I believe that some people with the scrupulous disorder have a perception about people that do not suffer from scrupulosity. They perceive others to be people who live their life with a certain sense of confidence and conviction. They seem to have a belief that people who are not scrupulous somehow never doubt, never question, never agonize over a decision. I understand where this perception might come from, but let me assure everyone that it is most certainly not an accurate description of reality. Although it is true that people who do not suffer with scrupulosity are not constantly bombarded with questions, second-guessing themselves and the people around them, it would not be true to believe that there are no questions and no anxiety as part of their lived experience. The difference is found in the magnitude and the frequency of the questions about life, and not necessarily in the presence or in the absence of questions. For example, a person who does not suffer with scrupulosity may well engage in trying to determine, to the best of their ability, whether a particular action or judgment may have been sinful. They will examine their conscience, try to identify the intention behind their choice and decision, and then decide if it fits within the parameters of the definition of sin. If they determine that it does, such a person will confess their sin and celebrate the forgiveness of the Lord in the sacrament of reconciliation. If they determine that it's not sinful, they will then let it go and move on with their life. If we contrast this process with the process that a scrupulous person might go through, faced with the same need to determine the category of a specific action or judgment, we might immediately recognize the difference. More often than not, a scrupulous person will begin the process of determining the potential sinfulness of the action or judgment long before the time specifically dedicated to the examination of conscience. They will review every possible nuance, examine every possible motivation, and try to accurately pinpoint the actual moment when they feel that a sin may or may not occur, and then perhaps begin the process over. Eventually, however, somewhere in the process, the scrupulous person will have to decide about the action or judgment. It is at this moment when the difference between the scrupulous person and the non-scrupulous person is the most telling. A scrupulous person finds it almost impossible to risk the possibility that a particular action or judgment is not sinful, and is therefore reluctant not to confess it, while a non-scrupulous person is willing to take the risk and to move on. It is not a matter of good person or bad person. It's not a matter of theology, but is rather one of the differences between the scrupulous and the non-scrupulous person in matters of conscience, or at least in the willingness to take a risk in matters of conscience. There are a variety of reasons that can be offered, at least in partial explanation for the difference. I would emphasize that the presence of OCD, with scrupulosity as the primary manifestation of OCD, is the most obvious debilitating culprit in many instances. Still, other culprits would include a person's understanding of God. For example, if they see God primarily as a God of love or a God of judgment, or other kinds of learned behavior that might make a person anxious and hesitant in decision-making and judgments, not just those directly or indirectly associated with sin. Regardless of how or why there is a difference, there is nevertheless a need for both the scrupulous person and the non-scrupulous person to occasionally risk a little of themselves, or perhaps even a little of their sense of comfort, if they intend to grow in the spiritual life. It will definitely be more difficult for a scrupulous person to do so But despite the difficulty, a scrupulous person is not exempt from the process. Spiritual growth occurs only when a person moves forward. Spiritual growth occurs only when a person is willing to test the parameters of their relationship with God, and in the process of the testing, discovers something about the essential qualities of the relationship and of the persons involved in the relationship. The spiritual journey is not a spectator event, and we cannot be satisfied and filled unless we participate. Or to put it another way, unless we answer the call of God to personally respond to the invitation of life in the kingdom. That being said, there is another aspect of the process of spiritual growth that needs to be understood. There are many spiritual paths that can be chosen. There are many and varied responses possible to the call of God. There is not one way that must be followed. Each path demands that we take a risk to begin the journey. If you wish to learn more about this topic, please refer to the citation that we have provided. Please visit YouTube at Catholic OCD for a variety of video presentations on important topics. If you wish to support this ministry, please visit the funding platform at patreon.com, also at Catholic OCD.